Every Sunday at exactly 4:15 p.m., someone knocked on her door, and none of us knew why. Hi, my name is Hannah Brooks. I'm 30 years old, and I work as a pediatric nurse at a children's hospital in Chicago. 3 months ago, my grandmother passed away, but the mystery didn't begin with her death. It began years earlier with a stranger. My grandmother, Margaret Maggie Brooks, lived alone in a modest brick house in Evanston. Every Sunday, rain, snow, or summer heat, the same person would visit. They never stayed long, never joined family dinners, never attended holidays. Just a quiet knock, a 30-minute visit, then they'd leave. When I was younger, I once asked Grandma who it was. She smiled and said, just someone who remembers. I didn't understand what that meant, and honestly, I didn't think much of it. The visitor was always neatly dressed, mid-40s, maybe early 50s, calm eyes, respectful posture. They'd bring flowers sometimes, other times a small grocery bag. They never looked like a threat, but they weren't family, and that made my father uneasy. Why is she entertaining strangers, he would mutter. Grandma would simply shrug. Kindness doesn't require an audience. That was her way. Simple, firm, unexplained. After Grandpa died, the Sunday visits continued. Exactly 4:15 p.m., like clockwork. Sometimes I'd be there. I'd hear soft laughter from the living room, low conversation. Once I caught a glimpse of them holding Grandma's hand while she spoke about something serious. It didn't look romantic. It looked grateful. But grateful for what? We never asked, and Grandma never volunteered the story. When she passed away at 84, it was peaceful. She went in her sleep. No dramatic hospital scenes. No last-minute confessions. Just quiet departure. At her funeral in Evanston, family filled the small chapel. Neighbors came, church friends, former co-workers, and then the stranger arrived. Black suit, white lila in hand. They sat in the back row, alone, head bowed. After the service, as people shared memories, the stranger waited patiently near the exit. I noticed they didn't approach anyone, didn't introduce themselves, just stood there as if unsure whether they were allowed to belong. Something about that tugged at me. So I walked over. Hi, I said softly. I'm Hannah. I'm her granddaughter. Their eyes softened immediately. I know, they replied. Their voice trembled slightly. My name is Daniel. I had never heard that name before. Not once. I visited her on Sundays, he added gently. I know, I said. We all did. He nodded slowly. She saved my life. The words landed heavier than I expected. I led him outside, away from the crowd. What do you mean? I asked. He looked at the sky, collecting himself. 20 years ago, I was living in my car, he began. That wasn't what I expected. At all. Daniel didn't look like someone who had been homeless. He looked stable, professional, composed. He continued. I lost my job, then my apartment, then my family stopped answering my calls. I was embarrassed. I didn't want charity. I just needed time. One winter evening, he said, he was parked near Grandma's street in Evanston, freezing, hungry, exhausted. Grandma had noticed his car sitting there for 3 nights in a row. Most people would have called the police. She walked outside with a thermos of soup, knocked on his car window, and asked one question. Are you safe? Not what are you doing here? Not why are you here? Just are you safe? Daniel said he broke down crying. He hadn't heard kindness in weeks. Grandma invited him inside, gave him a meal, let him shower, and when he tried to leave out of shame, she said something that changed everything. Everyone deserves a reset. She let him stay in her spare room for 3 months. No rent, no pressure, only 2 conditions. Apply for jobs daily. Join her for Sunday tea. That was it. No lectures, no judgment, just structure and dignity. Daniel eventually found work, saved money, moved into his own apartment, rebuilt his life. He offered to pay Grandma back. She refused. Instead, she told him, "Visit me when you've made it. Not to repay me, but to remind yourself." And so he did. Every Sunday at 4:15 p.m. For 20 years. He brought updates, shared promotions, talked about buying his first home. He even showed her the photo when he got married. "She was the first person I told," Daniel said quietly. "I felt tears building in my eyes. Grandma never mentioned any of this. Not once. Not to my father. Not to my aunt. Not even to me. Why didn't she tell us?" I whispered. Daniel smiled gently. "She said kindness loses power when it becomes a story about the giver." That sounded exactly like her. At that moment, my father approached us. Suspicious expression. "Everything okay?" Daniel stood respectfully. "Yes, sir. Your mother helped me once. I came to say thank you." My father frowned. "Helped you how?" And that's when Daniel told him everything. Right there, in the church parking lot, as snow lightly fell around us. My father's face shifted from confusion to disbelief to quiet shame, because the truth was simple. Grandma had room in her home for a stranger, but sometimes struggled to get visits from her own children, and none of us knew the impact she had quietly carried for 2 decades. Before leaving, Daniel handed me a small envelope. "She asked me to give this to you someday," he said. "To you specifically." My hands trembled as I took it. On the front, in Grandma's handwriting, "For Hannah, when she's ready to understand." I wasn't ready, but I knew one thing. The Sunday visitor wasn't a mystery anymore. He was proof. Proof that the smallest acts echo the longest. And what I read in that envelope changed how I saw my grandmother forever. I'll tell you what she wrote, and why Daniel's visits didn't end with her funeral. If this story is touching your heart, stay with me, because some impacts are unseen. The envelope felt light in my hands, but what was inside carried 20 years of weight. "Hi, my name is Hannah Brooks. I'm 30 years old, and I work as a pediatric nurse in Chicago. If you watched, you know that a stranger named Daniel visited my grandmother every Sunday for 20 years. After she passed, he revealed that she once saved him from homelessness. But before leaving the funeral, he handed me an envelope. It had my name on it, and underneath, in Grandma's soft handwriting, 'When she's ready to understand.' That line alone made my chest tighten. I didn't open it right away. Grief makes everything feel fragile. Instead, I waited until that evening. I went back to Grandma's house in Evanston, the same brick house where Daniel once slept in the spare bedroom, the same living room where Sunday tea was served at exactly 4:15 p.m. The house felt different now, quieter, like it was holding its breath. I sat at the kitchen table, her table, and carefully opened the envelope. Inside was a handwritten letter, 3 pages long, neatly folded. I recognized the steady curves of her handwriting immediately. "Hannah, if you're reading this, it means Daniel finally told you the story. I asked him not to speak of it while I was alive, not because I was ashamed, but because I didn't want kindness to become currency. When you help someone, it should not purchase admiration. It should restore dignity." My eyes blurred with tears. That sounded exactly like her. She continued, "You will meet many patients in your career who look broken. Some will be loud in their pain. Some will be silent. The silent ones need you most." That line hit differently. As a nurse in Chicago, I see children every day who don't complain, who simply endure. She knew that about me. She always knew. The letter explained more about that winter night 20 years ago. Grandma wrote that she had been watching Daniel's car for days. She noticed condensation on the windows each morning, noticed the way he avoided eye contact when neighbors walked by. She said something in the letter that stunned me. I wasn't brave. I was simply unwilling to ignore what I saw. That sentence echoed in my mind. Unwilling to ignore. How many of us see suffering and decide it's not our responsibility? She didn't. Grandma admitted she was afraid the first time she knocked on his window. She was a widow in her 60s. He was a stranger, but she said fear and compassion often arrive together, and we choose which one answers the door. She chose compassion. Months later, I made a decision. I started volunteering once a week at the housing center. Not because I felt obligated, but because I felt connected. Grandma once wrote in her letter, "Let them decide if your name deserves to be spoken. I don't need my name spoken. If one child feels safe because I showed up, that's enough." People often think legacy is about inheritance, money, property, recognition, but Grandma left none of those things loudly. What she left was influence, quiet, unannounced, unseen until revealed. And now, it lives in families she never met, in graduates she never saw walk across a stage, in a building carrying her principle. If you're listening to this right now wondering whether small kindness matters, it does. You may never see the full outcome. You may never hear the thank you. But somewhere, someone may be knocking on a door because you once opened yours. Thank you for staying through this story. If it moved you, if it reminded you to notice, to ask, to care, please like and subscribe, because some impacts are invisible while we're alive, but they echo long after we're gone.